It started as a regular evening, or so I thought. The house was quiet, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a magazine, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that had settled in my chest. Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint why. James was away on another business trip, leaving me alone in the house with Kelly, his daughter. She had been unusually quiet all day, retreating to her room without the usual sarcastic remarks or glares. It should have felt like a relief, but instead, it made me anxious. "Kelly?" I called out, hoping to start a conversation. There was no reply. I stood up and walked to her room, knocking gently on the door. "Kelly, are you okay?" Silence. I pressed my ear to the door, but all I could hear was the faint sound of music. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door slightly and peeked inside. The room was empty. The bed was unmade, her backpack tossed carelessly on the floor. My heart sank as I noticed the open window. Where could she have gone? I quickly checked the rest of the house, calling her name, but there was no sign of her. Panic began to set in. Kelly wasn't one to leave without a word, even if she disliked me. Grabbing my phone, I dialed her number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. "Kelly, it's Olivia. Please call me back as soon as you get this. I'm worried about you." Hours passed, and there was still no word from Kelly. I paced the living room, glancing at the clock every few minutes. The uneasiness grew heavier, and memories of our strained relationship flooded my mind. Over the years, I had tried to bridge the gap between us, but Kelly's resentment always seemed impenetrable. Her harsh words and cold stares had become a part of my daily life, yet I had never given up hope that things would improve. Now, with her missing, I felt a pang of guilt. Had I done something to push her away? As the night deepened, I heard a noise outside. My heart leaped and I rushed to the window. A shadow moved near the edge of the yard. Was it Kelly? Grabbing a flashlight, I stepped outside, the cool air biting at my skin. "Kelly?" I called, shining the beam into the darkness. The figure paused and turned toward me. It wasn't Kelly. It was a man I didn't recognize, dressed in dark clothes. He froze for a moment before bolting into the woods behind the house. Fear gripped me as I backed into the house and locked the door. Who was that? What were they doing near our property? My thoughts raced as I dialed James, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left him a message, trying to keep my voice steady. "James, something strange is happening. Kelly's missing, and there was someone outside the house. Please call me back as soon as you can." The rest of the night was a blur of restless pacing and checking the locks. When morning came, I decided to call the police. Officer Martinez arrived within an hour, taking notes as I explained everything. He assured me they'd do their best to locate Kelly and look into the suspicious man near the house. In the meantime, stay inside and keep your doors locked. If you see or hear anything unusual, call us immediately, he advised before leaving. I spent the day glued to my phone, hoping for any updates. When evening came, exhaustion weighed on me, but sleep felt impossible. As I sat on the couch, staring at the empty fireplace, a knock at the door startled me. My heart raced as I approached cautiously. "Who is it?" I called out, but there was no answer. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Peeking through the peephole, I saw Kelly standing there, her hair disheveled and her face pale. Relief washed over me as I unlocked the door and pulled it open. "Kelly, where have you been? I've been worried sick." She stepped inside without a word, her eyes avoiding mine. Her silence was unnerving. "Kelly, talk to me. Are you okay?" She glanced at me briefly before heading to her room, closing the door behind her. I stood there, bewildered. Something was wrong, but I didn't know how to approach her without pushing her further away. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Kelly's return was only the beginning of something more sinister. The house felt heavier, the shadows darker. Around midnight, I heard a faint noise coming from Kelly's room. It sounded like whispering. I crept down the hall and pressed my ear to her door, straining to hear. The whispers stopped abruptly, and the room fell silent. The next morning, Kelly was already at the kitchen table when I woke up. She was eating cereal, her expression blank. Good morning, I said cautiously. She didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the bowl in front of her. Kelly, about last night. Where were you? She looked up at me, her gaze cold. It doesn't matter. It does matter, I insisted, sitting across from her. I was worried, and there was a man outside the house. Do you know anything about that? Her expression didn't change. You're overreacting. Maybe it was just someone passing by. Her dismissive tone frustrated me, but I decided not to press further. Pushing her would only make her retreat more. Instead, I tried to focus on maintaining a calm and safe environment, though the uneasiness lingered. Over the next few days, strange occurrences began to escalate. Doors that I knew I had locked were found ajar. Objects in the house seemed to move on their own. One night, I heard faint footsteps in the hallway, but when I checked, no one was there. Kelly remained distant, her behavior growing more erratic. She would disappear for hours and return without explanation. One evening, I found her sitting in the living room, staring at an old photo of James and his late wife. Kelly, is everything okay? I asked gently. She looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. Why did you have to come into our lives? Everything was fine before you showed up. Her words stung, but I tried to remain composed. Kelly, I'm not trying to replace your mother. I just want us to be a family. We were a family, she snapped. You ruined it. Before I could respond, she stormed out of the room, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. That night, I heard the whispering again, louder this time. It seemed to be coming from the basement. Gripping a flashlight, I made my way downstairs. The air was cold, and the shadows seemed to move as I descended. The whispering stopped as soon as I reached the bottom. The room was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next day, I decided to confront Kelly. Kelly, what's going on? The whispering, the man outside, your behavior. I need answers. She smirked, a chilling expression that sent shivers down my spine. Maybe you should stop looking for answers you don't want to find. Her cryptic response left me reeling. What was she hiding? Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to check her room while she was out. My hands trembled as I opened the door. Inside, I found a notebook filled with strange symbols and phrases that made no sense. Tucked between the pages was a photo of James and me, with my face scratched out. A noise behind me made me jump. I turned to see Kelly standing in the doorway, her expression a mix of rage and triumph. You shouldn't have done that, she said, her voice low and menacing. Kelly, what is all this? I demanded, holding up the notebook. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. You'll find out soon enough. Fear clutched at my chest as she grabbed the notebook and stormed out. That night I barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities. What had I gotten myself into? And how could I protect myself from someone who seemed so determined to destroy me? The following days were a blur of tension and paranoia. Kelly's behavior grew increasingly erratic, and the strange occurrences in the house escalated. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly on edge, waiting for the next unsettling event. The final straw came when I woke up to find a note taped to my bedroom door. It read, "Leave before it's too late." I knew then that I couldn't stay silent any longer. I called James and told him everything. He promised to come home immediately. While I waited, I packed a bag, ready to leave if things took a darker turn. When James arrived, I broke down, recounting everything that had happened. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious with every word. We need to talk to Kelly, he said firmly. Together, we confronted her, but she denied everything, her face a mask of innocence. James wasn't convinced, and for the first time, he seemed to see the extent of her hostility toward me. That night, as the tension reached its peak, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I clung to James as we searched for a flashlight. From the hallway, we heard a loud crash, followed by Kelly's voice, screaming something unintelligible. We ran toward the sound, only to find her standing in the living room, surrounded by shattered glass. "Kelly, what are you doing?" James demanded. She turned to us, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted things to go back to the way they were," she sobbed. James stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. Kelly, we can't change the past, but we can work on the future. You need help. For the first time, Kelly didn't argue. She nodded, her shoulders sagging in defeat. It was a small step, but it felt like a breakthrough. Over the following weeks, James and I worked together to create a more stable and supportive environment. Kelly began attending therapy, and though progress was slow, there was a glimmer of hope. The house grew quieter, the shadows less oppressive, and while the scars of the past remained, we started to rebuild, piece by piece, a future that